I think this is a forum to be honest, because personally, and I'll speak for myself, is I disagree with that on Obama's perspective. I had a completely different take on him. I think Biden's 4 years were a disaster as far as taking our country places that it never was intended to go, which is vastly different how you see it. But I respect that's how you've taken it. But what Mike just said, you're going to translate what Mike said through your filter, and I'm transferring it through my filter. And I think that's on one hand perfectly fine. But
Yeah,
we've moved away
yeah,
from the fact that I have been transferred out of the kingdom of darkness and I am now living, and I have a king who is awesome. I'm living in the kingdom of light. And that's my dilemma is to function in this craziness that we put on the table, but realize the beauty of true Christianity is I've been removed from that in a sense, but yet I can still function in it. Where the conversation has quickly turned, it's just going to be opinion perspective that we have the right, in our country particularly, to basically think the way we want and get away with it. Because in many countries, if you're contrary, something happens. In our country, you can pretty much do whatever you want and
yeah.
say whatever you want, and nothing really happens to you. And that's really a beautiful thing. It's misused, it's abused. Where we go with this, I'm just putting out a tell. That's how I'm taking this right now, because now it's just going to become a difference of the way we see things and our worldview. Then, if the layover, what if, as a Christian, what do we do about it? Well, you as a Christian, Jerry, you're going to do what you want to do. Me as a Christian, I'm going to have this different angle. I'm not sure there's a mesh here, and I may be rattling a little too far because I went way beyond my original thought. So anyway, I don't know if that made any sense.
You're illustrating the exact point why we're here.
That's right.
I,
That's right.
I,
It is.
I agree with you, Dave. I have a different perspective. I have government experience behind me that has a respect for law and government and governance and how the government works. I was a program manager of a major program in the Department of Defense. I worked classified programs. I worked in a cell. I was a chief of a classified cell that I had 4 employees, and we lived in we every day went to a vault, top secret stuff. And one day, let me give you this anecdote here. One of my employees was in a hurry to go home, so he took a classified document, and what he thought, he made it clean. He took all the unclassified stuff out of it, and he went to a Xerox machine on the way out, and he faxed it to another office in the government. The next day, me as the boss and that employee were in the security office for a security violation. The reason these things are so important to be held close is because lives are at stake, millions of dollars are invested, and for top secret information to be let out implicates the security of our nation in dramatic ways that the common public doesn't understand. And that's the kind of nonsense that's going on in our government today.
Mhm.
And the reason it's emotional for me is because it's my experience base that I'm dealing with. And you're right, I do have a different view. And that's my exact point. How do those two viewpoints, for the sake of our country, we're going to get into authority and the constitutional boundaries that are being violated, but for the sake of something that's the very foundation of our republic is the Constitution. That's a secular thing, but in my opinion, it's divine too, because all authority comes from God. And we're going to talk about that. How do we come together with our different views to some mutual benefit of our country? That's my point.
Well, and that's a great point, and we should be able to, because my identity is not wrapped in this. This is not who I am. This is what I do and where I live.
Yeah.
And that's a beauty from a Christian perspective. I am not my country. I mean, I don't worship my country. I love my country. I'm glad I'm here versus there and all that. So, I mean, that should allow us to, but we make it personal and we start making judgments on the other person because they don't think like that. We do that in all aspects of life. If they don't dress the way I like, then the older you get stuck in your routines, you're not as accepting. If we're going to say this is the way we are now, from here how I'm hearing it, but there is just as much unconstitutional violation the previous 4 years than there may be now, if there is now. And then you may disagree with that also. And then we're going to get into a conversation of bringing up and putting our facts against my facts, your facts against my facts. And then we may not want to talk to each other anymore, which I don't want to happen. And that's why I think there's such a tension with this.
It's interesting that how people are raising the issue of the Constitution, its authority, how it's under great threat. Of course, they want to use it to oppose Donald Trump. And it just reminds me of where you were, Jerry, talking about the rise of the moral majority and Jerry Falwell. For them, it was the Bible. If we just go back to the Bible, everything will be fine. Well, now you have secular people who say we just go back to the Constitution and everything will be fine. And yet, whose Constitution is it, right? And then how do we even understand what this thing is and how it works? And that's what I mean about Americans having short memories. The Constitution is not a weapon, and neither is the Bible. And yet they function that way in certain people's hands. And they use them to beat up each other. Like now I got one up on you because, I'm this and I'm this and I'm this. Now, I think I'm going to speak as a Christian and I'm going to speak as a theologian. It's always been a tough sell in America to talk about original sin, because Americans viewed our history as somehow leaving those kinds of deep, dark beliefs behind in Europe and traditional Christianity. And coming to America that was extreme with the open frontier and all kinds of possibilities in front of us, that somehow we were exceptional. And that original sin, the vestiges of what is essentially the self turned in on itself, as Martin Luther said. We're turned in on ourselves, which then cuts us off from God and cuts us off from others. We're made to love God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength. We're made to love our neighbor as ourselves, which means as God has loved us first, right? That's what we were created for. That's the beauty of the divine image. Well, when not just the belief in that in theory goes away, but actually our operating conviction about who we are as human creatures becomes displaced and replaced by other views of humanity that believe that we're much more capable of taking charge of the world and managing it ourselves, we get in trouble. And there we see Adam and Eve, the story of Adam and Eve being relived over and over and over again. As the tempter says to them, you shall be like God. And we believe that we have godlike power in our hands, in our minds, in our wills. But that power is no longer defined by the power of God dwelling in us. It's that we manage it ourselves. Now, I see that's the deep, 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 deep issue that Christian people can never let go of. Because if we do, then we also then no longer have a need for a Lord and a Savior who dies on the cross and is raised from the dead. And Jesus then just becomes whatever we want him to be. And that's where the gospel is at stake in this. You see this in the book of Acts in the way they engage with the Roman Empire, its culture, and its politics. There's a transcendent view, right, that we represent the risen Lord who has conquered sin and death. And then we live accordingly, which was quite revolutionary in its time. I'll stop. I could go on and on about it. I mean, this is stuff I've thought about for a long, long time. But I do think that this is at work in it, and that Christians are guilty of this too. People who study these things are appalled in so-called evangelical churches where they don't talk about sin and they don't confess sin. Well, that sends the message to people, you're okay. And then whatever you do is okay. And we lose the self-awareness and the capacity to know ourselves and look at ourselves in the light of God. All bets are off when that happens.
You all might think we're not going where I wanted to go, but we're exactly going where we wanted to go. Okay, so let me drill it down the next step. Okay, we're working my agenda very well here. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.